I was building slowly in New York City around 2018, and then
Okay.
the pandemic hit. And at that time, I was really focused on doing live workshops because I thought that's what you need to grow a business. But the pandemic came along, and that is where the entire thing pivoted to online. Now, meanwhile, I'm watching my friends on Instagram while I'm in New York City, and they're out having a great time in Lisbon. I thought, I want to do that. And why haven't I done that in my life? And so that's what really started the ball rolling. I saw what other people were doing and thought, how can I do that?
Welcome to Global Professionals in Portugal. My name is Cordelia, and today's guest is Jordan Goldmeier, and he is an entrepreneur who lives in Lisbon. Jordan, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you have an interesting business model where you do some consulting, you do some online course offerings, book writing. Can you tell me a little bit about your suite of business operations?
Sure. So I help people become better with Microsoft Excel and with data so they can make better decisions at their job, in their lives, all that. I just love data. So I help people do this really three different ways if we're thinking about my business. The first is online courses. So I've developed several online courses around analytics, pivot tables, data science. I've also written 4 books. You can find them on Amazon, and I just love writing. And then finally, I have one big consulting client, and I have really good terms with them. I don't track my hours. I told them that, I'm not
Yeah.
going to do that. And so we work really well together, and you put it all together and you get a business that's helped me come to Lisbon and live a digital nomad life.
How long have you been in Lisbon?
I am coming close to 2 years now.
Had you started to build this digital empire before you moved here?
That is a very complicated question to answer, but I'm going to keep it short because I know how people's attention spans are now. So I had a vision for it, and I was building it slowly in New York City around 2018, and then
Okay.
the pandemic hit, and it really changed the business model because at that time I was really focused on doing live workshops and things that put me in front of people because I thought that's what you need to grow a business. But the pandemic came along, and really showed me that I couldn't just be chasing contracts. I couldn't get in front of people anymore. And that is where the entire thing pivoted to online. Now, meanwhile, I'm watching my friends on Instagram while I'm in New York City, and they're out having a great time in Lisbon, or at least I don't know if they really were having a great time, but we're just showing like many of them were traveling the world. They use this time to do that. And it really reflected in that moment. I thought, I want to do that. And why haven't I done that in my life? And so that's what really started the ball rolling. So 2022, I got here, and I think many ways the prep happened in 2020 when I saw what other people were doing and thought, how can I do that?
What kind of platform do you use for your courses? Do you have your own platform or do you use like Udemy or something?
So I have tried out a lot of different platforms over the years. So the courses that I sell through my site at advancedexcel.com, those are on Thinkific. And
Mhm.
then since actually a huge portion of my course sales come from vendors, it really all depends on what they want. So if they're going to affiliate sale for me,
Right.
then that's easy. It comes to me. But most of them actually want it on their platform. So in that case, it's whatever they choose. So LinkedIn Learning, they have their own proprietary platform. I think what works today for corporate analysts who really want to know how do I solve this problem is courses that are specifically focused around a problem, in which case a beginner could come in and actually learn these advanced topics, but they're not learning the theory of them.
When you moved to Portugal, how did you get your approval?
Sure. So I looked online to see how people were moving to Portugal. So that's what I did. I saw them do it without hiring a company. So I just followed their instructions and I did all the paperwork myself and got that going myself.
Do you travel and work or do you just take work breaks and travel?
In this life, it is very hard to travel and not work. I know that like people on Instagram and TikTok are like, yeah, just shut it all off. Meanwhile, they're on their phone recording that they've shut it all off.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. It's very hard. I think that I tell a lot of people this when they're like, oh, I would love to live this life. I'm like, are you willing to work on your birthday? Are you willing to work on vacation? Are you willing to be at a party? I don't have a whole lot to take with me. My laptop basically does it all. I could do a podcast from anywhere. I do carve off slices while I travel. Like I put on my calendar where I'm like, this is vacation. As you probably know, when you travel, that's when you get your inspiration. There are things, if you want it, you have to carve off time and you have to make it important for you and you have to communicate that. Like you have to set the boundary. The client will not do that for you.
So now how did you come to your niche of senior level Excel expertise?
when I was young, let's say 10 years old, I knew I wanted to do something in computers. So at the time, there were no like programming classes or any of that.
Mhm.
But I did find in the kids section of the library like books on coding. So I checked out these books, but I didn't have anything to code with, so I just read them and then I'd reread them because I thought they were so interesting. I knew from when I was young I wanted to code, and finally I got the chance to do that. And I just coded and programmed a whole bunch of stuff as a kid. But as I got older, it did seem as we went through Y2K and shortly after that, that being a programmer in the US was not the career that it seemed like when I was a kid. My dad convinced me to become an accountant. So I did an accounting degree and I minored in computer science because I still loved it. And when I went off to be an accountant, to be an auditor for the Air Force, I was actually a terrible auditor. Okay. If you gave me data, I was great at it. But there is a skill that they don't teach you in college that's very similar to bedside manner of a doctor, but I guess it's the
Right.
inverse for an auditor. I was very sympathetic to their complaints, which you're not supposed to be as an auditor. But the other side of it is we used Excel a lot, and I'm watching this point and click, and just everything was so slow. And I'm like, guys, I could code something up that's better than this. So I did all this coding in Excel just because I knew how to code. And pretty soon people were like, can you do this? Can you do that? And so I built this whole toolbar that we could use in Office, and it caught the attention of Washington, D.C., and they flew me out to present it. And then they like distributed this big toolbar to 7 bases around the world. And I thought, wow, this is great. And they're not paying me anything. I'm still like an intern and I hate this job. So I started looking for jobs specifically doing that. And I became an operations research analyst, is what they hired me for. And I had no idea what that was. But I saw people doing all this math to model things, and they needed people to do it in Excel because if you built it in Excel, you could send it around to people over email. Otherwise, this was back before you had to do like an application had to get approved by the Air Force. So this was our little workaround, and they needed people who were good at that and could build this complicated stuff and think like a programmer. Because all the people going through were more engineering, like they could program, but they weren't thinking optimization. They weren't thinking like, how do you make this fast and efficient? And so I started doing that, and the rest is history. Later, they would hire me to be a data scientist, so I called myself that. And then eventually, nobody would hire me because I didn't like working for people. And
You decided to share your knowledge in a way that gave you freedom and also help people grow their business and do the things that they need to do.
there's a kind of selfish reason for that. I don't know. I just enjoy doing it. I think that a lot of this stuff is made to be perceived to be unobtainable. And the guru stuff, it's all about the limiting beliefs and this and that. But I just think on a fundamental societal level, there are just so many things that we are taught that are unobtainable. And that's just optimizing a system in which we self select out of doing the things that we might want or enjoy. So I share it because I feel that there's too much holding people back. There's too much like anxiety. It's a lot for a little. Like if you just get over it, you would see that actually there's a greater world out there. And I would love for people who aren't happy with their jobs to take the opportunity to build something for themselves. I think this is a great market to do that and a great time to do that.
It's more the mindset and the thinking, and then thinking how it can apply into your life. Maybe you're really good at Excel and somebody else is really good at plumbing. It doesn't matter, right? It matters the mindset and the approach and the relentless willing to learn and do things differently, I think.
I have this phrase I've come up with, which is that you have to take all advice and season it to taste, right? Like the advice is good, but everyone's taste buds are different.
You say you have one really steady client. How did you land that client?
I originally met them in 2014. I tried to go out on my own in 2014, lasted a year, and then the bills came due, so I had to get a real job. But in that time, I was working with an agency and they connected me to this client. And in some ways, it was just luck. They were just more sophisticated. They didn't argue about everything. They had a vision and they saw how I could get them there. And so that client, I helped build a model for them that they then used for the next 6 years, but I didn't know that they were going to do that. I think maybe it was a limiting belief on my own work that I didn't believe that I could build something so enduring, but it did endure. And when I was working for myself again and I needed to get clients, I said I got laid off and divorced in 2018. So that's when I was like, okay, we're starting the business back up again. This is the universal sign. I went to all my old clients, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh, we're so happy you're back. At that point in time, I've known them now for 6 years, not really just checking in here and there, besides from when
Right.
they hired me. And I felt that I had the clout to actually ask for something that was not what people would perceive as the correct type of contract, but one that would work for me the best way. And they said yes. So I just really, that was me just dipping my toe in the water. And then I asked for something a lot bigger.
It's so important to find your niche. The other thing you said that I really love is there's a moment, right, when you decide to go for it.
Mhm.
And for you, you were laid off and you were divorced. You're
Yeah,
living in a very expensive place to live. Not everybody would say, "Oh, time to go out on my own," right? Like, this is the universe telling me now. But you were like, "This is it. I'm going to go for it." And that's, I would say, the thing that echoes in every episode. If people want to go back and watch, everybody had this moment where they decided that they wanted to live the life that they wanted to live, and they were going to make it work. And that's a key moment. And because you could have also been like, oh my God, I just got divorced and laid off. I better go get another job. That would have been another like path that you could have taken.
it's true. And I almost did take that path, I have to say, many times. It's every time it felt like I should go get a job, something good would happen with the business. Or actually, at a certain point, I realized I was unhireable. So during the pandemic, I'd be lying if I said I did not try to get a job. I got interviews with big companies like Instagram, Spotify, or I should say Facebook. But I think they all liked me in the interview, but then they looked at my resume and were like, "Oh, this guy is destined not to stay here." And they're right. And I just have to say, if this ever happens to the people out there, it was hilarious because I'm trying to get my business going, and then I have to take an interview. So in the past, if I had an interview, I'd be like, "Yes, I'm so eager, I'm so happy," and I think about it all day. But then it became another meeting, almost like a sales meeting for me. So I'm sitting there calmly. This is what I got. And I think that it makes you likable, but not hireable. This is the thing everyone needs to understand about the leap into the business. There is a point there is no turning back. Like you think, okay, I'll do this, but I can always get a job again. I think that like you can always maybe get a contractor role or advisory role, but could you get a real salaried position? Maybe as a founder, taking a huge amount of risk. Like I don't think they're going to just bring you back in a regular salaried role. Ultimately, I'm glad it really worked out and that this was my destiny.
So it was one moment, but it was also like a series of moments where you kept having to choose it over and over again.
I feel I'm fairly risk tolerant, but I'm definitely not the most risk tolerant person I know. Like I think it took longer for me to get my footing because I had these escape hatches. I'm not saying you should burn the bridge. Everyone needs to move psychologically through it as their own journey dictates. Otherwise, you will fail. You'll keep getting hit until you realize it, until you go with the flow on things. I do think in all cases, there's always been an escape hatch until I was able to say no. But once it stopped working out, once I realized no one's going to hire me until I fundamentally become a fake person who's just narrowly focused on getting a job, because I'm so narrowly focused on running the business, I have to take that job energy and put it in the business, no turning back. And I've had to start over many times, as it were. Like I've failed multiple times, but then that makes you really good at starting new things because you acknowledge the path of starting over.
I think that there's this combination of finding something that you are passionate about, but also that you see that there's a demand for that is lucrative, right? How can I leverage my passion and also leverage what the market needs, which is you've done. You've been able to take your, as Liam Neeson would say, your special set of skills. You're solving an expensive problem.
It's true. And the thing is, I could be making more money. People ask me, why don't you build a consulting force? I don't want to manage people in that way. I've tried a few different ways. It was never my dream to run a consulting agency, but it is my dream to operationalize my life. And so I put my focus on the development of passive strategies like courses and the like. My people, and you can go on LinkedIn, you can see them. They comment on my stuff all the time. They're far more advanced. My avatar, it's already someone who's good at Excel.
It is challenging when you are somebody who's at, say, a moderate to advanced level skill set of something to actually find content that's relevant because so many courses are trying to cast such a wide net. You're like, okay, I'm going to sign up for this 100-hour course for the last 2 hours of it. You do get to this point where you're like, I don't have time to sift through the 98 hours. I just want that too.
Yeah.
I'll pay more to get that too.
And I think new entrepreneurs should really consider what you're saying. You really want to think that way. It's not even like price is irrelevant. Being a generalist has never really worked for me And so it doesn't work for my clients.
Do you pretty much just do your thing in a bubble and it almost doesn't matter where you are? Or have you tried to integrate into the Portuguese ecosystem?
I've tried to integrate a little bit into the Portuguese ecosystem, but it's harder because I don't know the language. So then it's like kind of one of those things where I thought I could just slot myself in. And so now I have to take a step back and realize there's some prerequisites I have to get through, which is the language barrier is one of them. I am trying my best to get involved. It's a slow process. I am committed to doing it. So my 6-month plan is now more like a 5-year plan.
I think that's a really good tip, is that the timeline may change. What are some of the challenges you've had living in Portugal? Timeline is one of them that you just gave.
Yes. And I think, like you said, just being in America, like for all these years, I may have traveled, but I did not live in another country. And so I took for granted the way that culture operates in the US. There's just a way in which I relate to things here that is different than the way other people relate. And in particular, in Lisbon, which is an international city, now you have a whole bunch of people relating to things differently. And I thought that New York City would prepare me for that. Perhaps it did to some degree, but not in a way that I expected here. Like you said, waiting for things is what you do here. And on some level, I came out here to do that. That's been one of the challenges. The language barrier is a challenge as well. Online, they will say, oh, people speak English in Lisbon. But just come here, it's easy. But in fact, I find, despite this, that I have a deep desire to learn the language and connect with people. And if you want to learn how to dance fajo, you want to learn to dance bachata, you want to go somewhere that's outside of Lisbon and talk to people about their lives, even if they know English, it's not the same because there are words in Portuguese that are not the same in English. And if you want to be an appreciator of that, you have to commit to being part of the culture in that way, or at least I think everyone understands what I'm saying. The other thing is, I thought there would be a lot more people with the American mindset of business, but many Americans come here to escape that mindset, or at least to have a different view of it. And so they have already been affected. And so you're like, let's do this and that. And they're like, we'll see what the weekend brings. I think I'm just going to sit and have some brunch and read a book for 5 hours. And that, I'd like to do that for a half hour, but doing that for 5 hours is wow. These things have been challenging. And also, I will say on a personal level, I came here single. Dating is different in a way that I did not really understand or appreciate before. Just the approaches are different. The way Americans think about it is different. And again, you have an international group here. So you have a lot of people with a lot of different ideas, and it can be fun in the ways they collide. But I did very much take for granted.
One of the things that I really took for granted in the US is, and you can pick apart the fairness and justice of history easily. But the fact is that America's been a melting pot really from the beginning. It's been a melting pot of people from all over. And so it's really baked into the culture of America. You go to an American restaurant and you might have flavors from 5 different countries or more. But here, even though they're very welcoming to immigrants, it's still pretty new. Democracy here is only 50 years old. There's a newness to the melting pot that means that there's just a more established way of doing things that has been established for a very long time. When you go to a Portuguese restaurant, you're only going to see Portuguese food on the menu.
And if you go to a non-Portuguese restaurant, they will likely have Portuguese food on the menu.
What are some of the things that you love about being in Lisbon?
The working life that I set up. So I get to wake up, I work in the mornings. It's like beautiful. I went to the beach yesterday and it was just fun. Every day I can run the same routine. I wake up for work for about 4 hours. Then I can work on myself for the next 4 hours. So that's like my work day. And I should say work for 4 to 6 hours. So that includes everything from fun stuff, anything I want to like maximize about myself, singing lessons. I did that, dancing lessons, or just business meetings, things like that, but still like fun and enjoyable. And then that's my day. And then I can go around to Quimera and get a beer with other locals and expats. And it's just very relaxing and chill. I love the food in Lisbon, a lot of international food, a lot of different things to try. And I love the Portuguese food, like at the Tascas. Like I very much love just getting the chicken, rice, and eggs. It's like something your mom would make. It's like very good comfort food. And everyone's just so happy, just hanging around. And so I love that. And I love in Lisbon, there's always like something going on. It's not like New York City, like it doesn't have the hugeness of it, but it does have a lot of like dancing and clubs and just a really cool atmosphere. And I think too that there's just a way of life here, an attitude of more openness. People just have a generally more open attitude towards life.
What's next for you in Portugal? Are you just happy going to keep doing that, or do you have some goals on the horizon?
The main goal is to get citizenship through the D7 visa. So the 5-year plan is to do that. The next goals in Lisbon are eventually to create my own group of a sort, either whether it's a meetup or events or something like that. I know a lot of people do events here. I do want to do an event.
Thank you so much for being a guest. And you can reach Jordan on LinkedIn.
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. If you want to see the courses I'm talking about, many of them are on LinkedIn Learning, if you have access to that. Another place you can find me is on Instagram. So Instagram is a big focus this year. So definitely would look forward to a follow on that if you are interested.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.